This week in CIST 1520, we're going to look at tutorial 9, getting started with JavaScript. In this tutorial, we're going to look at inserting a script element, write JavaScript comments, display an alert dialog box, use the browser debugging tools, write HTML code and text content into a page. We're also going to look at how to reference browser page objects, use JavaScript properties and methods, work with a date object, use JavaScript operators, create a JavaScript function, and also create timed commands. First, we're going to start talking about the difference between client-side programming and server-side programming. The difference is server-side programming is when the program runs on the server. It's hosting the website. Some advantages of using server-side programming is that it connects the server to an online database. It contains that information that's not directly accessible to end users, so you have to have a ability to connect to that server. The disadvantages is it uses server's resources, it requires internet connection, and you can also have long delays in case the system overloads. So the way the server-side programming works is the user in here retrieves information or retrieves a web page from the server. That information is going to be sent through the internet to the server. The server is going to process that information and then send the request information back to the user. JavaScript is a client-side program. Okay, so that's what the program runs on the user's computer. Uses HTML, CSS files, download the scripts. This distributes the load to avoid overloading the program-related request. And once again, this is something that client-side can never replace the server-side. They will work hand in hand, as you'll see in other classes. So as you'll see here in this one, the way client-side works is, okay, so the user's pulled the web page down, but it has scripts that came with the web page. So the user is going to run that program locally. It receives instant feedback. Think of this as a form that you fill out. You access a web page, it's got a form to fill out. Maybe you have a format for an email address. So your email address has to fit a certain format. It has to have your login information or your username, and then the @ symbol, google.com, gmail.com, whatever your hosting service is. Okay, so it has that format. JavaScript can be used to check that form. So if you type in, if I just type in r_spurlock for my email address, JavaScript can check that form and tell me it doesn't meet the correct format. So it's going to save time for me sending that information to the server. If the server rejected it, and sending the information back, where JavaScript can be used to check the information before it is sent. Okay, as I said, JavaScript is a client-side programming language. It is an interpreted language. Okay, it's going to execute a program code without using an application. But it does have a compiler. The compilers are applications that translate a program code into machine language. Now, with JavaScript, you can insert this directly into a HTML page, or you can also link it to an HTML file, and we will cover how to do that later on. Now, for attaching a file, this is similar to how we attach the CSS files. So we can attach it by using the script element. As you see the syntax here, we'll have the script element, then the link, and then close our tag. In this case, the URL, that is the link, the URL of the external file. You can also embed your JavaScript. So an embedded script this is where you put it in the head section. So you have the script tag, then you write your code, and then you close your tag. Now, this is somewhere you can put that anywhere within the HTML document. When you have this embedded, the browser, when it encounters that script, from there it's going to stop loading the page. It's going to be loading and processing the script commands. Now you can put in different attributes, can be added to that script element to modify its sequence of processing. Because the async attribute tells the browser to parse the HTML and JavaScript code together. Defer attribute is going to defer the script processing until after the page has been completely parsed and loaded. These are ignored for embedded scripts. So we look at seeing in this script, or this clip of code, inserting the script element. So in here they have the script tag in the head section, the link to our external style sheet, our external JavaScript sheet. Then we have the defer. So we're going to defer loading the script page until the rest of the page is loaded by the browser, and then make sure we close our tag. Now, JavaScript is going to be created by using a standard text editor. This is something like your Notepad++, WordPad, and so forth. It is a good form to add comments to your JavaScript code. Those comments will help you understand the design and purpose of the program. They can be entered as a single or multiple lines. The syntax for adding your code or your comments are listed here for a single line. And this would be the syntax for multiple lines. So as long as we have our open and close here, all of this will not be processed and be read as comments. As we see an example of adding a JavaScript comment in this example here, where we got the beginning of the comment, the text of the comments, and then the closing of the comment. One thing to be careful of with JavaScript is make sure that you follow the syntax rules. First thing to be aware of is that JavaScript is case sensitive. Extra white space between the commands is ignored. If you have line breaks that are placed within the name of a JavaScript command or a quoted text string, they can cause an error. Debugging is the process of locating and fixing your program errors. Debugging is a big part of web design. Not only in JavaScript, but in HTML, CSS, you have to learn how to debug your code, to go through and just find where your errors are and fix them. Some type of errors you may run into include load time errors, runtime errors, or logical errors. Load time errors occur when the script is first loaded by the browser. Runtime errors occur when the execution of a script without syntax errors. Logical errors are free from syntax or executable mistakes, but result in an incorrect output. Okay, so for example, in this, if I was writing a program that would add 2 + 2, but my result would give me the answer of 5, obviously I have a logical error there. So I need to go back in and check my code. Now you can use debugging tools to locate and fix errors. The F12 key is going to be your shortcut for opening your debugging tool. You can also be opened by selecting the developer tools in the browser menu. Now, one useful technique to find the source of an error is to set up breakpoints. It's a location where the browser pauses the program to determine whether an error has occurred at that point during execution. So we see on the screen here, we have our message displayed because of the breakpoint. Just click to resume executing the script. I'm going to blow this up some here. So we see where it's paused in the debugger. And then we have our breakpoint in the script here. We have our Windows alert in this case. Now you can also apply strict use of JavaScript. Strict mode enables all lapses in syntax to result in load time errors or runtime errors. To put the strict mode on, to run in strict mode, you're going to add the statement of use strict to the first line of the fit file. An object is an entity within a browser web page that has properties and a method. So the properties are going to define the objects, and the methods are going to act upon the objects. JavaScript is an object-based language. Okay, so it's manipulate the object by changing one or more of its properties. So we can look at some different types of objects in here. We have built-in objects, browser objects, document objects, or something that may be customizable objects that's been created by the programmer. We use the browser object model and the document object model to organize browsers and documents in their hierarchical structures. You'll see an example of an object hierarchy here. Okay, so we see we have our window, we have our documents, history, screen, so forth. And you see how it's broke down into different hierarchy here. Now, objects are going to be referenced by their object name. So we have such as Windows, Document, Navigator. They can be referenced by using the notation object 1 dot object 2 dot object 3. In this case, object 1 is going to be the top of the hierarchy, object 2 is going to be the child of object 1, and so forth. So going back to the previous screen, for example, we could have Windows dot document dot forms. Okay, so that's how we can reference these as well. Object collections are objects that are organized into groups. If you want to reference a specific member of the object collection, you would use the syntax of collections, ID ref. Collection is going to show you the object collection, and in this case, the ID ref is either an index number or the value of the ID attribute. So we see some examples here of object collections. Document.anchors is going to have all elements that are marked with the A tag. Forms, document.forms, all web forms, and so forth through this. So if we want to reference those collections, this is how we would reference those, and this is what it would be pulling up. Now, one way you can reference an element is use the ID attribute. So use this expression of document.getElement by ID, and then in parentheses put ID. Okay, in this case, the ID is going to be the value of the ID attribute. Object's properties are assessed using object.property. Object is going to reference an object. Property is going to be the property that's associated with that object. Now, if you have an object that is has read-only properties, those properties cannot be modified. Methods. When you apply a method, objects can be changed, modified using methods. So you apply them using the expression of object.method and then values. Okay, objects, once again, you're going to reference an object. Methods, the name of the method that's applied to the object, and values is a comma separated list of values that's going to be associated with that method. When you're writing HTML code, the HTML code is going to be stored in a page element. It's referenced using element.enter HTML. Okay, in this case, element's going to be an object reference to an element within the web page. So if we have our HTML code stored within a page element, the example in this is to display the current date and time. We'll use the document.getElementById, and we'll use date now, and then we're looking at the enter HTML and get the date time that's listed. As we'll see here in this output. The current time will be displayed. This is something that's to be written with JavaScript. Now, to reference elements in HTML code, we'll see different properties or methods we can use. Element.enterHTML, that's when we're trying to HTML code that's within the element. Outer HTML, tries HTML code within the element. Also, the HTML code of the element itself. Element.textContent returns the text within element and disregards any HTML tags. And the element.insert adjacent HTML position text. In this case, it inserts HTML code that's defined by text into element at this position, where position is one of the following, where it's either before begins, which is before the opening tag, after begins, right after the opening tag, and then before end and after end, which is before and after the element's closing tags. All right, variables. These are names, items in the program that stores a data value. To declare a variable, okay, you introduce a script. You declare a variable using the var keyword, variable keyword. So in this case, we got the var. We're declaring a variable. The syntax for this variable here is going to be the name assigned to the variable, and then the initial value that we're going to set to this variable. So for example, if I want to put a counter in, I could declare the variable, name the variable count, and then set the value to 5 or to 0. So the first time that it's ran through, if I've set it to 0, it's going to start with the value of 0. Next time it'll be 1, and so forth, depending on how I increment and use the variable in my code. Now we do have some conditions to assign variable names. First character must either be a letter or underscore character. Characters after the first character can be letters, numbers, underscore characters. You have no spaces in your variable name. And also you do have a list of names that you can't use, a list of JavaScript language names that you cannot be using in this. You can also declare a data type. Data type is information to be stored in the variable. So we can store a numeric value, a text string, Boolean value, an object, or a null value. So we look at the variable types. A numeric value can be any number. Text strings are a group of characters enclosed within their double or single quotation. Okay, so it's going to be, for example, if I had the variable nice, and I can set the text string up to have a nice day. So when I called that variable, have a nice day is what would be displayed. Boolean value is going to be either true or false, the statement. The object simplifies code by removing the need to rewrite complicated object references. So you can call back an object after you've declared it. Null values indicates no value has been assigned to that variable. You do have some built-in JavaScript objects. For example, the date object that stores information about the dates and times. So we see how this is defined here. We got the variable set up for current day. In here, we're creating a new date. And then we have the date and time that is stored in the date object. If we're going to use this, for example, the variable this day, and we got new date and we got the date set defined, we have some methods in here that we can use to pull information out of it. So for example, we can say this day dot get minutes, and it's going to be the description's minutes, and it's going to pull 35 because it's going to look at the format and in our minutes area, our field is going to pull that information. And we can do this with the get seconds, get hours, get the date, month, full year, get the day. Looking at the day versus this day dot get day. So it's looking for the day of the week. So in this case, it's looking for Sundays will be 0, Mondays 1, etc. When we start off with this blank, it's going to start with these 0 instead of day 1 and so forth. This section of code here is going to display the dates and times. First of all, we're going to declare our date variable. It's going to just store the current date. This one is going to store the current time. The toLocal date string method returns the time of the current date using local convention. So it's going to look and see what is the actual time of the system. So in the actual code, we're going to document.get element by ID, look at date now, .enter HTML. So it's going to look through the HTML and pull this. The date start plus the time. So in this results, it's going to pull the current time of the machine, the date and the time. You can also use JavaScript methods to set values of the date object. We see here, for example, the date.setDate with a value. That's going to set the day of the month of the date. Value in this case is going to be integer ranging from 1 to 31, depending on the month, maybe 28 if it's in February. The date.set full year value is going to set the the full date for the year, the 4-digit, and so forth through these. All right, operators and operands. Operator is a symbol used to act upon an item or variable within an expression. Variables are expressions that the operators act upon. We do have types of operators we'll look at. First, we'll look at the binary operators, requires 2 operands in an expression. Unary operators require only 1 operand. So in this case here, we can use an increment operator. So like the 2 plus signs increases the value of operand by 1. Decrease is going to decrease the value by 1. So this, for example, in the count, with the plus signs, once we run through, we can increase the count. So we start off with 0, go to 1 the next time it's ran through, 2, and so forth. And we can use that to set conditions for our script so that we can set conditions of when to exit out or how many times it should run. So an assignment operator assigns a value to an item. So for example, in this one, the operand of the equal sign. So example, x is equal to y. So if we do the plus and equal sign, the example we'd write would be x plus equal y, which in that case that sets the value of x to x plus y, and so forth through these with multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. The math object is a built-in object used to perform mathematical tasks and store mathematical values. The syntax to apply a math method is the math.method and expression. Method is going to be the method supplied to the mathematical expression. For example, the math.abs with x in parentheses is going to return the absolute value of x. So we see the example of math.abs, and then the value that we want to find. In this case, -5. We want to find the absolute value of -5, which is going to return the value of 5. We do have some other options here. For example, the math.pal xy is going to return x raised to the power of y. So we see the example here that we're going to put 2 and 3. So we're going to raise 2 to the power of 3. So we're going to see the results of this before we get the number 8. The math.rand to return a number between 1 and 0. In this case, it could be either 0 or 1. It's just going to be a random number return. All right, so let's look at this code here. So we have the variables, hours left. So we got days left minus math.floor, days left. Then we're going to times it by 24. So let's go back and look at what is the math.floor. So that rounds x down to the next lowest integer. So we see the math.floor in this example is 3.58. It's going to return 3. Okay, so in this case here, we don't have all the information to find out the days left just by looking at this. But it's going to round down that. So if we come out with 15.2, it's going to return 15. You also have math constants. These are the math functions refer to built-in constants that are stored in the math object. So the syntax will be the math.constant, where constant in this case is going to be the name of one of the more mathematical constants supported by the math object. So we'll look at some of the math constants here, like math.e is the base of the natural logarithms. Math.pi will return the value of pi, and so forth through those. So those are constants that are not going to change. Functions, when you work with JavaScript functions are a collection of commands that perform an action or returns a value. The function name is going to identify the function, and the set of commands are run when that function is called. In here we do have parameters that are variables associated with the function. So we'll look at the general syntax of a function. So we have our function, and in this case, this is what we're defining the function. We're going to name the function. In the parameters, we're going to have a comma-separated list of variables that are used in the function. And then finally, commands. This is where we'll have our statements that are ran by the function. So we see here we have this is calling the run clock function. So they've given us code here, so it executes the function to run and display the countdown clock. So we call run clock, that calls this function. Okay, so the function here, we have function run clock, and then underneath these comments we'll have commands. They didn't give us the commands here. in this screenshot. You can also have a function that returns a value using a return statement. Syntax for this you see is the function, then the function name, the parameters, commands, and return value. Value is going to be calculated. Value is going to be returned by the function. You can have methods used to run to update the current and remaining time constantly, such as time delay commands or time interval commands. Time delay commands or JavaScript commands that run after a specific amount of time has passed. Time delays, they're going to be defined by using set the timeout. And then here you use command and delay. All right, command is the JavaScript command. Delay is the amount of time in milliseconds before a browser runs the command. You can also run commands at specified intervals. So it instructs the browser to run the command repeatedly as you have specified. So here you set the interval method. The interval in this is in milliseconds. So it waits until that milliseconds hits the desired time, and the command is run again. So we see the example of the code here. So we set the interval, we run clock. So it's going to repeat this run clock function every second. As we see, we have the millisecond set. You can also control how JavaScript works with numeric values. If you're handling illegal operations, mathematical operations to return results that are not numeric values. In this case, JavaScript is going to return a NaN. That's the operation does not involve only numeric values. So in this, you can use a function, for example, the isNaN function that returns a Boolean value of true if the value is not numeric and false if it's otherwise. The infinity value, that's generated for an operation whose results is less than its smallest numeric value and greater than the largest numeric value supported by JavaScript. JavaScript will store numeric values to 16 decimal places of accuracy. If you want to change the number of digits displayed by browsers, you control that using the toFixed method. So in this, you would use the value.toFixed, and then n is the syntax. Value is going to be the value of the variable. N is the number of decimal places to be shown in the output. The toFixed limits the number of decimals displayed in the value. It converts the value into a text string. It also rounds the last digits in an expression rather than truncating it. The plus operand adds a text string to a number to convert between numbers and text. The example here, we have the test number is set to 123. So we got test string variable. We're setting that equal to the test number plus we're setting it to a text string. All right, so in this case, it's going to combine the text string and the value. It's going to result in a text string. ParseInt is a function that extracts the leading integer value from a text string. So it's going to return the integer value from the text string by discarding any non-integer characters. For example, the parseInt, and we have the number of 120.88 and pounds. When that is ran, it's going to return 120. It's just going to remove this and only return. It's going to ignore the string, the non-integer values from the string. This example here, the weight equals to 120 is going to return not a number, as it cannot find a number. And we do have some other options here, other numeric functions. The is NAA, for example, is going to indicate whether a value was a number. Parse int string. It's going to extract the first integer value from the text string. Parse float string extracts the first numeric value from this text string. Once again, these are the names of the objects we are working with. Looking at MonTap this week, okay, you are to read chapter 9. Okay, the chapter itself does have different commands, gives you examples of commands that you will use in your actual projects. It does have a program that you can work through, a JavaScript file. Those are not required. Your assignments are in your tutorial 9, getting started with JavaScript, under the tutorial 9 code. Okay, so you will have the case problem 1 and the case problem 2 that we do this week. So in these assignments, you will have first the description of your chapter or your assignment. So you have a summary telling you why you're designing this website, you're adding JavaScript to this website. The build website button has been moved from MonTap. You can use the little arrow down here to refresh. That will refresh your browser. You can also use this arrow to expand your website to another tab. All of your files are listed here. Your instructions are listed into your files. Even if it says you will not be tested on this step, you need to make sure that you do complete that. For example, if you do not insert a script element in your page, in this page here, that page will not read your JavaScript. So none of your other assignments will check off. So even if you have them all correct, it will not link back. So even though they're not checking you for inserting the script here, you need to make sure you do that as well. So when you're working on your assignment, it will give you the information of what you should do. And once you're finished with this, you need to make sure that you come down and check the dialog box, the checkbox, to check your information. Now, in this example, it's to declare a variable named this time containing a date object for February. You can always refer back to your book. And look for example, creating a date object. Okay, it's going to give you the syntax for the code in here. Then it'll give you a example of your code. So your information that you're looking for in your labs, this information is in your textbook. So I highly recommend that you refer back to your textbook, as it will give you the information. Now, obviously, there is some difference here. For example, in this case, the variable this date, and it's got it for May 23rd. You would name yours this time and then set it for February 3rd.